So I'd like to introduce you to John Ashford, sitting in London, who's a contemporary dance producer. And there are a lot of things I could tell you about John Ashford. I want to point out two things. He was the theatre director of the Place in London for quite a long time, from 1986 till 2009. And during this time, he founded the Aerowaves network, or how to say it. Aerowaves is a hub for dance discovery in Europe, but I'm sure, John, that you can phrase it way better than I can. So I would give the word to you, John, to introduce Beatrix to the others.
Okay, thank you. And I hope you can hear us okay. This is an experiment to put us on two screens because we're in different places. We thought we would try and do a seminar rather than a lecture, because I've been in quite a lot of Zoom lectures over the last year and a half, and I'm really bored with them. So the important thing is that both Beatrix and I can see you fairly well. And the difficulty about Zoom compared to real life, I think, is that it's hard to interrupt. But actually here, I think you can interrupt. So if there's something which isn't clear, or you don't understand, or you have an immediate question about what we're saying, if you make a big gesture, we see you. So you can interrupt us. And let's try and have a conversation rather than Beatrix and I just giving lectures, because they're boring. So the conversation we thought we would have is a conversation about what I do and what Beatrix does, because what I do could be of use to you in the great hereafter. and Beatrix has faced the great hereafter much more recently than me, about 4 years ago. So her experience is a bit more up to date than mine. So I know Beatrix because she's a writer for Springback Magazine. And I also know that she has a website and that she is a choreographer and is currently preparing a piece for the early autumn outdoors in Berlin. But we don't know that much about each other otherwise. We did meet actually 2 or 3 weeks ago in Ljubljana at a short festival that we did through Aerowaves. But beyond that, we ask these questions of each other because we're really curious. We don't know what the answers are going to be. So I'm going to begin by asking questions about Springback, because that's how we know each other, of Beatrix. And then she's going to ask me questions about Aerowaves, because that's how she knows me. And then I'm going to ask Beatrix about what the dance world was like when she graduated into it in times before COVID. And she's going to ask me what I think the dance world is going to be like to graduate into in times which are during or after COVID, which could be very different. So that's the broad structure of our conversation. It should take about half an hour. And then after that, we're going to ask you some questions. So let's begin. And the first question, quite obviously, from me to Beatrix is, how did you find out about Springback, and when was that?
So first of all, hello from my side. I'm Beatrix. I'm here in Belgium, just outside Brussels, where my family lives. And I just want to say that it's very nostalgic for me to look into this beautiful dance studio that you have here, because indeed I was in your position not so long ago, but in a very different time. So yeah, I'm excited to see how this goes. Yeah, I started with dance, I graduated from Laban in London in 2014. Yeah, 2014. And then I think I got to know about Springback in the years following, because I started with writing about dance. So I was kind of dancing also in London, working as a freelancer, and I realized that I also enjoyed writing and reflecting on the dance that I was seeing and that I was making also, as I was working as a maker as well. And so then I kind of got into journalism or dance journalism at the time, and Springback was just very prominent somehow in my circles. I found out about it, and I knew that basically at Springback, they were like writers or dance writers were being trained to write about dance. And this really appealed to me because it's really a very open open activity to be writing about dance. And so I like the idea of having some guidance. And so I turned to Springback already in 2017, and my application was rejected. As it was again in 2018. So my application was rejected repeatedly, but I kept going. And then in 2019, I was finally accepted to be a part of this dance writing troupe. And that's where I went that's when I went to Paris. In 2019, there was the Aerowaves festival in Val de Marne, yeah. And that's kind of where it started for me at Springback. And since then I've been, what happened?
This is where I'm going to interrupt. So yeah. When you say you were rejected twice.
Yes, I was.
I should explain, that means that with Springback, we have an open application process. And each year we get proposals from about 100 writers from all across Europe. And they are required to send us a specimen of their writing. And so when Beatrix was rejected twice, I was one of the panel who thought her writing wasn't good enough. But she, you know, as she says, kept on. So obviously the writing got better, because third time lucky. And when she says she was accepted for Paris, that means that we run something called Springback Academy around our annual festival, which is called Springforward, where we have 20 works on show over a weekend. And during this, we have an academy where the 10 writers that we accept each year go through an accelerated tutoring process. So that's just background, Beatrix, sorry. But so which actually was my next question, which is when you were a part of that academy at La Briqueterie and elsewhere in Paris, how was it? Was it, did you really gain from it? What was the accelerated mentoring, something which you felt was worth the investment of going?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that because the Springback Academy is essentially run by Una and Sanjay Roy, so Una Duckworth, and the two of them run it very well, and they basically invite different mentors or different journalists as well to tutor or to mentor the writers, and that was very helpful because as I said, it's a very open activity to write about dance, and having these kind of having these tutors or having this guidance, having the possibilities to come together and to also read what other people were writing, that was very, very rewarding, actually, to be affirmed in it. Yeah.
Did you meet people for the first time? Was it useful as a networking event? Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. Yes, I met lots of people. Continue to meet people through Aerowaves. That's a very nice thing about it. Yeah. Should I continue with some questions to you?
No, you shouldn't, because I have one or two more questions about this. So when you've been through the academy, you are then able to write for Springback Magazine. What is Springback Magazine?
Well, Springback Magazine is a publication which covers actually mainly contemporary dance, but also, I would say, not only established choreographers, but also emerging choreographers across Europe. It's a very interesting publication to write for because it allows you to, it gives you more freedom to not, as I said, to not only write about the big names in the you know, who are performing on big stages, but rather to also, yeah, cover some kind of lesser known choreographers, especially those that you see locally or who are active in your kind of, when I say locally, I mean, at the moment I'm based in Berlin, so I tend to write about choreographers who are active in Berlin. Yeah, that's
and it's a website, it's online, and it does have a membership section, which is a kind of professional area, which is very useful for research because it has very many videos there. And it does exist in print. Here is the current annual. There's last year's, and we also have one from 2019, which is when we started it. So this is a kind of, this is quite a big book actually. This is all the stuff which is on the website collated into a print edition each year, which is sometimes useful for those who write for it to present in order to get other work. Just one last question, Beatrix, and then it's your turn to ask them. Did you find that you drew any benefit from being associated with Springback? Did it bring you other work? Can you say categorically it brought you other work, or did it help in some way to have an international platform rather than a local one?
Yeah, I think that especially the international connections are very valuable. I think that it's mainly in the training and the sharing of my writing with other writers, and this whole what we call the kind of boot camp. So the whole the week-long kind of training in writing, that has been the most beneficial to my own practice, I think. Yeah, definitely. Okay, so then, John, I'm going to ask you a bit about Aerowaves, because we've been speaking about Springback, which is the kind of offspring to enter the wordplay. So Aerowaves is a network of contemporary dance across Europe. And you founded Aerowaves 25 years ago now, which was a very different time for Europe. And I'm wondering, what was your motivation back then for the foundation of Aerowaves?
It was actually quite simple, because I was working in London at the Place Theatre, as you said, and it's quite difficult to imagine 25 years ago. We were anyway living on an island, but also we didn't have Ryanair, we didn't have EasyJet. If you wanted to travel to another European country from the UK, you're pretty much obliged to take an airplane, unless you were going to Belgium, in which case you could take the Jetfoil and 2 trains and it would take all day, which I did quite a lot. But if I wanted to go further, I would go to Amsterdam, because there was a lot of international work I wanted to see in Amsterdam. And because there were only national airlines at that time, they had their own kind of cartel rules. And you had, for instance, to stay a Saturday night to prove that you were a tourist in order to get a cheap ticket. If you were flying during the week, the cost was very, very high indeed. And so even at weekends, with allowing a Saturday night to elapse, I would think that by today's standards, flights were probably at least double or 3 times more expensive than they are now. And actually, that's the true cost of flying. We must remember that the market is very distorted now. So that meant that it wasn't difficult, it wasn't easy to speak to your neighbors. And it wasn't easy to see the work of neighboring countries. Obviously, if you're in Belgium, then it was easier because you could take trains across borders. But in the UK, it was difficult. On the other hand, because of the international season I was doing, I was getting a lot of VHS videotapes from young artists. And I remember that they were difficult to interpret, because if anyone has seen an archived videotape on a VHS, what you get is usually a shot from the back of the theatre with these tiny little figures doing something you can't really understand on a stage a long way away. And so through my travels to Belgium and the Netherlands and elsewhere, I met maybe a dozen people whose opinion I really respected in terms of looking at new work and backing young talent. And so when this pile of videotapes had grown to about 70, I thought, what a good idea to invite these friends of mine to come to London, and together we would watch the videotapes so that they could tell me what these tiny little dancing figures were actually doing and whether they thought they were any good or not, because they would have local knowledge about those artists. And that was really a device to help me in programming that work at the Place Theatre. But to my surprise, I recognized that people were sending videotapes to London because of the strength of our international program and not sending them to my friends. And so we were becoming a kind of clearinghouse for the ambitions of younger artists. And so when my friends came to London to see these videos, very often, most of them were seeing these artists for the very first time. And as a result, they decided to put them on as well. So suddenly we had a network, and it was going to work for 1 year. But then Mariana Kyanti, who had come from Helsinki, offered to host another meeting the following year. And so the following year, more of us went to Helsinki. And so it gathered speed. And it wasn't subsidized. For the first 14 years, I think, we had no money to support our travel or to support our meetings or anything else. We did it because we loved it. And we were a group of individuals, not institutions. And this is a spirit which I tried to preserve in a network which has expanded and expanded over 25 years. So we are now 44 people from 33 different European countries. And we do meet still once every year. Now we do have funding, and we've had funding from the European Union for 7 years as a platform and a further 4 years as a network. So 11 years in total, growing each year, which means that 10 years ago, we were able to start the festival, which Beatrix attended in Paris. We started it in Ljubljana. We called it Springforward. And the idea was simply to put on the works which we had selected at the meeting we had every year so that people could see them live. And from those live performances, our partners now choose 3 each to put on during the course of the year. So it's a really simple structure. There are some complications, but obviously as we've got larger, and also with the obligations of funding, because we are now responsible to the European taxpayer, not just to our own enthusiasms. And so it has become something which many younger artists graduating out of dance schools now regard as an institution. And we are criticized as an institution, which surprises me a lot because it really doesn't feel like that. We don't have an office. There are only 3 of us who work on it full and part-time. We all work from our homes. And it still feels like an informal network of friends to me. So even though it may be regarded by those who come to us and are now making applications over the summer for our next round, for our next festival, which will be in Elefsina, outside Athens, in May next year. It's actually still, I hope, a fluent and flexible and inventive structure that is still animated by this enthusiasm we all share for the new views of the world which young dancers can bring us.
Yeah, and actually that's what I wanted to ask you about as well, because I can imagine that for our students here, that there's a big question of like where to go next, what to do, where to be. And so I'm wondering, with all of these applications that you receive, which now are no longer on VHS, but are all digital, of course, and it's all streamed, I guess, or people send links. Of these video applications, well, still video-based applications that you receive, can you identify which country the artist is creating the work in? I mean, I guess, of course, they also state that, but just from the aesthetics of the piece, can you already see, oh, they're coming from this specific scene or this specific school? Or yeah, I'm wondering if there are links there.
That's interesting, because it has it's changed over the years. I'm now sitting in the room where I work, and over there's an enormous OLED screen, which is standing on the floor, and the video files I get, I play on it, and often the camera is pointing maybe in a studio or studio theater where I see the floor, and actually I feel like I'm in the studio. I can really now, in my memory, not really differentiate between a work I've seen live and a work I've seen on video. The experience of just being alone, concentrating on it, watching it from beginning to end, is very, very similar to actually seeing the work live. Of course, it's never really going to be as good, but now the quality of the video is never in doubt. So no one should ever fear representing their work by video, I think. When I watch these works, I do it over about 10 weeks, 12 weeks, and I feel that I'm in a hugely privileged position, because I don't know anyone else who does this, and I get an overview of what's happening amongst younger dancers and choreographers in Europe. I mean, really throughout geographical Europe, from the Ural Mountains to over in Galway in Ireland, and from the bottom of Portugal, the Algarve, up to Lapland. That's the geographical area that these videos are coming from. So it's a huge privilege to be able to see all that and look at the world through the eyes of these young makers. The question you ask is very interesting, because certainly when I was watching DVDs, which succeeded VHS videotapes, I could quite easily say immediately, oh, that's from Helsinki, because it would be this kind of glacially perfect trio. And that's what they did then. Tero Saarinen in the early days sort of invented this. That for some reason, they just did everything in trios in Helsinki, and technically everything would be just perfect. And also they would pay attention to costumes. It wouldn't be t-shirts and jeans. There would be settings. The lighting would be absolutely fantastic, because in Finland they have great lighting designers. And so it was possible to recognize immediately where one country. What happened then was that as more and more dance academies and universities opened around Europe, and because it became easier to travel, people would start crossing over and wouldn't study in Finland at the state school there anymore, because actually the places were very limited, but maybe come to Belgium and go to Parts, or come to London like you did, Beatrix, and go to Lauben. And so gradually it became less obvious what country they were from, and more obvious what school they had been to. Mm. And it was easier and easier for me to say, oh, well, clearly this is a part student who graduated 2 years ago. I know exactly where this is coming from. Another dancer who's done a lot of Gaga and wants to be a choreographer. Suddenly it became, well, not suddenly, but slowly it became more about what the background was or what choreographer they had been working with as a dancer to distinguish what the work looked like. So it was less to do with geography and more to do with the environment in which that artist had developed their own ideas. And then finally, in the third phase, if you like, it's now almost impossible to locate anything geographically, because so much of the work I see is from people who come from all over Europe and want to do a project together because their ideas are ones which they want to share with each other. Their trainings and their specificity as artists are something which they bring together to make work in the most collaborative way as is possible, compared to 25 years ago when it was a single choreographer telling other people what to do. So now the work has become more and more collaborative. And as it's become more collaborative, so the backgrounds of the people who wish to collaborate have become more interlinked. So now, when I look at videos, I have no idea where the work's coming from, but I know what Dock 11 looks like in Berlin. So, and I see a lot of videos, so I know Dock 11 inside out. I can tell you exactly where the door is. I know exactly how many configurations of the seating you can have in Dock 11. And similarly in other, I know immediately if I see the inside of a part studio. So really now it's more to do with where the video was made than any kind of cultural identity, if you like.
Yeah, so no idea really where the art is from, just very high quality video recordings.
Yes, but also actually, a tribute to the European Union and the use of culture as a method of constructing the European citizen. I mean, it's really true. It sounds boring and something which many people might resent, but creating the European citizen out of the diversity of its different nations is the European project. And it's reflected, like everything is reflected, in dance.
And also in Aerowaves then.
And also in Aerowaves, yeah. And that's what interested me from the beginning with Aerowaves, which is that I think the best thing that can happen to a young artist is to be taken out of the cocoon of support in the city in which they've made the work with people from maybe all over the world, and place it in a city on the other side of Europe where they don't know anyone, where it's received entirely differently. And just the experience of presenting that work in an utterly different cultural context is the thing which I think is about the most formative step you can offer a young artist. So this remains the task or the opportunity which is offered by Aerowaves to give young artists the opportunity to get their work known better, but also develop as artists by being challenged, but in a different environment.
Yeah, well, that actually, I just have one last question I want to ask you about Aerowaves, which I'm just very eager to know about, actually. As you know, we just had this 25 years celebration of Aerowaves in Ljubljana. We were there a few weeks ago, and looking back now over the 25 years, I'm wondering, what do you consider to be Aerowaves' biggest failure? Is there anything that you would do differently had you the chance to go back, turn back time and change something?
Well, from a global point of view, and it's not Aerowaves' failure, but I have to say Brexit. If actually, not only Aerowaves, but my generation failed through culture in my country to prevent the most scandalous political act of self-harm that I can imagine in my lifetime. And what's even worse is that our government compounded this absurd decision by withdrawing not only from the European Union, but also from the wider network, which is called the Creative Europe Network, which is actually 40 countries. It goes way beyond the countries of Europe. And you can join that even if you aren't in the European Union. But so strongly does our government feel that we should extract ourselves in every way from being a part of European culture. They rejected even being that, as indeed with the Erasmus scheme. I mean, crazy. So that's what I would change. I would change that vote. And I'm, you know, I believe absolutely in the power of culture. And so that's one point where, for me, a whole generation failed. You know, in the UK, everyone working in the performing arts made the biggest stand they possibly could to prevent that decision, and it didn't work. So that's the big one. On a much more local level, where did Aerowaves fail? I think the obvious answer is we didn't sign the Beatles. If you see what I mean. You know this story about, you know, I'm sorry, this is my generation, so it doesn't make so much sense to you. But when the Beatles first formed, their first record label was Parlophone. They went to 2 people before then who turned them down. So my big fear, I suppose, is that when we have these 600 applications each year, there is a major new artist that we miss. And I won't go into great detail about how we make those choices, but they are as open and democratic as possible during 4 days of a meeting where we all join together in one place. And I go into that meeting knowing that we have to choose 20 out of 600, which is ridiculous and unfair. And I personally go into it usually with a list of about 40, which is my personal wish. So I know that 20 of those are going to go. And I know that amongst those 20 might be the Beatles. And then there are some which come in, because the point of the meeting is that the partners will talk about the videos that we've seen. And they will say, this video was done at an early stage of the rehearsal. Actually, the piece is much better than that, and this is why. And so something which I thought was really of not much interest suddenly gains a lot of interest at our meeting, because the partner speaks passionately about the success of the work when it was actually in the theatre. So what happens finally is that out of the 20, which we choose through a vote, and therefore are very diverse, 10 of mine from my 40 are there in that 20. So a quarter of the ones which I believed to be the ones we should be backing are the ones which actually get the attention. And 75% of them have to apply again next year with a new work or whatever. So I suppose, although this is a long answer to the question, my real, the failure is those artists we have let down because our process has not properly recognized their early work. I wouldn't want to name any of those artists now. I mean, there are artists where their first work has been recognized, like Jan Martens, for instance, in well, is he Belgium or Netherlands? I'm not sure. But I mean, there is a catalogue of artists who we've seriously discovered, that are our successes. And the ones who have subsequently been successful without our help that we turn down are the ones I feel that we have failed. Because I think we offer really good opportunities. Is that it?
Yeah, no, I was thinking about what you were saying. Yeah, I'm just keeping an eye on the time a little bit.
Yes.
You promised to talk a bit about the post-pandemic phase.
Yeah, we did, but I've got some questions for you first. We thought we'd talk for half an hour. We're going to talk for another 10 minutes, okay?
Yeah, maybe ask Stephanie.
Yeah, sure. Please.
Are we doing okay? Anyone gone to sleep yet?
Well, no, everybody's still awake.
Nobody's waving at us. Okay. Then I'm going to go back to my questions for you, actually, because they are quite specific in relation to the people who are listening to us. So going back to your experience at Laban, when you were graduating, what did you do immediately when you graduated with a dance degree?
Yeah, so I was in London. I finished, as I said, in 2016, and then 2014, and then I started working as a freelance dancer. I was working for different, actually mainly visual artists, because I already was more interested in working outside of the theatre. So I was working for visual artists in kind of gallery spaces, and I started working with my cousin in Amsterdam, who had just, who was just at, finishing her degree at Rietveld, which is also a kind of more visual arts school. And so she invited me to perform for her in her installation piece. And that's how our collaboration started. And it was quite a strong collaboration at the time. And I did actually do an MA at Goldsmiths in sociology at this kind of, that was happening alongside it in parallel. And then we kind of started talking somehow about Berlin. And we both kind of knew of it as a city which was good to go to, or there was a lot going on. It was good for the arts. It was good for dance. You know, we'd heard about it kind of as a myth. And then we just decided to go. We just kind of like both finished our degrees. I finished my degree at Goldsmiths, and she finished her degree at Rietveld in Amsterdam. And then we both moved that autumn, or that summer in 2016, and started working together in Berlin. So for me, it was very much connected, really, like my move to Berlin was connected actually to my collaboration at the time. And we are still working quite closely together, although in kind of on separate projects. Mm. And it was just a bit of a leap of faith, really. I didn't really know what I was doing at all. Still don't know, to be honest.
Did you speak German?
No, I didn't speak German at the time. I've made quite an effort to learn. So können auch auf Deutsch reden mit die Leute aus München. Yeah, no, that was something that I did as I arrived, and that I realized was also very helpful for me. And so, yes, I think it was mainly motivated by what my situation.
I understand, but in making that decision, which I completely understand, were there not still opportunities in London which you rejected? And were there not still opportunities for her in Amsterdam she rejected? And why didn't you choose London or Amsterdam?
Well, I can speak for London, and for me personally, it wasn't working out. I think that there were people in my environment, in my direct environment, also students at Laban, so my peers, who had managed somehow to get funding quite early on, and their work was quite solid somehow. They were really managing already. Also, they were more connected to the place as well. I was not really connected there. And so I felt very much kind of alone in this sense, and I didn't have the energy, because it was just such an incredibly difficult city to survive in. Well, to keep making art, basically, because of the financial pressure that's also placed on people in this way because of it being expensive. So it was a hard place to keep making my art, and I also had some failed projects with other artists that just then at some point it was a bit demotivating, and I just needed a fresh start. But that's not to say that London is not a good place to go to, because I do think, and I see now how other artists also who have been selected by Aerowaves later as well are managing very well there as well. So I think it's got everything to do. It's a very personal and context dependent situation where you just have to kind of or I just made choices that worked for me in that moment.
Yeah.
But I don't think.
And what about Amsterdam?
Well, I think Amsterdam, having gone back a few times now as well, and having built some connections there, I think Amsterdam is also a very exciting place to be for the arts. I think that for
Hang
my
on, I need to say
something.
Sorry, I need to interrupt you. Because your second language is Dutch.
Yes.
So it's kind of easy to go to the Netherlands.
Well, yes. I mean, yes, for the language, yes. But yeah, that doesn't necessarily, it's not especially attractive to me.
It doesn't matter.
To be in the Netherlands. But no, I think Amsterdam could also be really nice in this way. It's just that, again, for my cousin, she didn't see that many opportunities for her immediately. And I think Berlin is a very attractive place because there's just so much going on. And there was, at least when I moved, there was the possibility to kind of find your own tribe, let's say, or the group that the art that you're interested in making. That's what we had.
And do you think that at that time the aesthetics which you believe to be current in Berlin were most suited to your interests?
No. What's good about Berlin is it's very cheap to produce in a way. And what's good about it is that it's so incredibly saturated with artists. There are just so many different people with the energy and the motivation to make work and to be involved in work. That's also immediately its problem, is that it's also oversaturated. So there are too many people at the same time, which makes it very hard to actually get your hands on funds. So of course, but it's cheap to produce in that you don't, that it's kind of easy to actually get things started in this way. But at the same time, to get things started properly and to actually be paid for what you do, that's incredibly difficult. So yeah, so it's kind of it's a very attractive place when you're starting out in this way and you just want to meet people and to see what's going on. I also had no idea about the aesthetics in Berlin before moving to Berlin. So it wasn't really the choice that I made, like, oh, I know that in Berlin there's these choreographers that I really like. It was more that I just knew that there was a whole load of people over there and a whole load of art, which is very true. It's a huge mixed bag in Berlin. There's all sorts of stuff from many different backgrounds and kind of qualities, let's say.
But that in a sense was what attracted you.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And then two final questions, quick ones. So in Berlin now, you're both an artist and you're a commentator on what's going on there, because you have your website, you write, and you also do podcasts. So do you find there's a conflict there, being both artist and commentator or critic?
Yes. I think that's exactly why I don't actually identify with critic, because I've found more and more that the writing that I do, for me, it's very much about going to see or having seen work that has inspired me in some way, or I've been connected with a choreographer who I have then, how I've enjoyed what they've made, or I've been inspired by what they've made, and I've wanted to go deeper into what I've seen. So it's the desire to kind of reflect more on what has happened there and and see how that can also be made accessible maybe to other people, or to build a bridge somehow. And it is a form of helping to promote them, which is exactly where the conflict comes in. And so I would rather even consider myself more on the side of promotion and more on the side of actually trying to build the work and extend it beyond its stage life as well, because writing exists outside of live performance. And to kind of, to somehow be involved in that whole process, for me, is that's more the reasoning behind it, I think. So I sit more on this side than on the side of the critic, who might be more involved in kind of going to see different shows and criticizing them. It's not quite maybe where I see my writing practice. Yeah,
I get that. So then a description as dance writer is probably more appropriate than critic.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then finally, that what you have done has led you twice to work on the editorial team of the Tanz in August magazine. So you have been assembling a lot of information about the curation of the curated program, which has been curated by somebody else. Does that make you want to curate a program yourself, if you're interested in promoting the work, as you say?
No, absolutely not. No, I think curation is such a hard job. I don't think I'd want to do that. No, that's a whole different skill set again. You know, you have to be able to organize people, to know, like, I don't know. It seems to me like a very complicated and very political job. As my housemate, she's a curator in the visual arts, and the stories that I hear from her, I think, wow, you have to be able to stand a lot. So I like to work behind the scenes and, you know, see the work and write about it and reflect on it and be busy with it in my head and help other people to come and see it who would like to recommend it to. But I think that actually setting up a program, you know, making my own work is what I'm busy with at the moment. So that's my main kind of output.
Yeah, I have to say that even though there is such an age gap between us, if anybody had asked me why I was the theatre editor I was the founding theatre editor of Time Out magazine in London. And I would, if anyone had asked me why I did it 50 years ago, I would answer exactly in the same terms that you've just answered my question.
Well, yes, and now you're a curator, or a programmer. Yeah, who knows?
By default. Okay, your turn, and then we're through.
Yes. Should I ask about the post-pandemic phase as indicated?
I think you should. I think we should move on to that, because this is the
crux of the matter. Yeah. Well, of course, we've had COVID, or that's, having already phrased it like this, we've had COVID is conflictual, because perhaps some believe that we're not yet out of this pandemic, others believe that we're done. In any case, it has had a massive impact so far on Aerowaves as well. And so my questions to you is basically, well, what kind of impact have you noticed the most? And how do you think the future looks now, now that we are, let's say, in optimistic terms, moving out of this pandemic?
Okay, well, I'll start with Aerowaves and kind of move outwards a bit. In terms of the specific Aerowaves structure, we were not able to present our live Springforward festival last year. It was going to be in Elefsina in Greece. And the year before that, we were not able to present it. It was to be in Rijeka in Croatia. So what happened with the one 2 years ago in Rijeka was that we moved the whole thing online at a point where nobody had attempted that, because it was right at the beginning of the pandemic. And so we tried to create a social space and present all of the 20 works over a weekend live online. And fortunately, we worked with a very creative media team, and they were able to do that, I think. And we had a surprisingly good virtual attendance of about, I think, 1,400 people, with 200 watching at any one time, which is about the same as we would have had if we'd done it live. So, but nevertheless, it's still a mediated experience. It's not what we really want to do. The result of this is that when we finally do present a live festival next year in Elefsina, we will have 3 years to choose from. So there are 60 artists we have chosen, and still only 20 slots. So, and I think this is probably indicative of what's going to happen in the next year or year and a half as we slowly emerge from this pandemic, which is that there is a build-up of people who have either produced works before the pandemic and not been able to present them because of it, or have had a lot of time in the pandemic to create new works which they now want to show. So this is going to be difficult, not just for us, Frosso Trusa, my colleague in Greece, and me in choosing 20 works out of 60, which in themselves are out of nearly 2,000 applications. So the gateway is very, very narrow. This is going to be a problem for everybody emerging into this world. The opportunities are not going to expand to take account of this deluge of damned work which is going to come into the dance world. And so since that is the case, I would say that it's going to be very difficult for those sitting in front of us to begin to get a foothold, because there's already those people who have been frustrated for a couple of years waiting for those opportunities. So this is not good news. On the other hand, the pause of COVID has allowed producers, presenters, and funders and artists to talk to each other in the virtual space of Zoom and recognize, like so many other things, COVID has exposed inequalities and the need for structural change in light of the climate crisis that will bring about new things. And this coincides with a new 7-year parliament at the EU, where the Creative Europe scheme is now starting up and inviting new applications for new projects. And that fund has received a significant financial uplift. And as far as Aerowaves is concerned, for instance, that results in about 25% extra money compared to what we had last time. So this means that there is some chance that new projects will come about, which will begin to offer new opportunities for those who are now graduating into this new field. But it's going to take maybe a year for them to get going. The deadlines for the new Creative Europe schemes are generally in September, which means that the results won't be known until the early new year 2022. So these new projects which offer new opportunities probably won't begin until the middle of 22 and for the following 3 years. So I think that probably those artists who are now emerging into this world are thrown onto their own resources in a way in which you were in London, and maybe where people were more protected in, let's say, France, where funding for the arts is much more developed, or indeed the Netherlands or Belgium, or if you're in Budapest or Athens, then it won't make so much difference because funding for dance is so hopeless there anyway that the opportunities will be not so significantly different. And I must say that I'm not frightened by this. I don't think there's going to be a lost generation because some of the work which interests me most comes from Budapest and Athens. And like it or not, people enter dance out of love of the art form and what it can do. And they don't do it for the money. So I think there is a degree of necessity and driven desire to create work amongst those who have become dance artists, which will overcome these financial difficulties. If you look at the example of the United States, where everyone has to wait tables in order to be a dancer, that's not good. And I hope it's not going to be like that. And I hope that the more generous funding structures of the European Union will prevent that from happening. But I think the need to make work is really so present in all young generations as they find out how they can use the skills and artistic approaches which they've developed in training. At this moment, you know, I wonder why it is. And actually, almost every week I see a reason as to why it is. And this week it was the Olympics opening ceremony. I don't know if anybody saw the Olympics opening ceremony. Did anyone in the room? Here's a chance actually to put your hands up. Probably you were in classes. Did anyone see the Olympics opening ceremony? No. Okay. Nobody saw the Olympics opening ceremony. Okay. I'll describe. You were busy. They did it very well because it couldn't be triumphant in the way in which, for instance, China was. And so the first part was a very serious event dedicated really to the difficulties which have been brought about in the world by the pandemic. And there should have been 68,000 people in that stadium. It was nearly empty. And there were millions and millions and millions watching all over the world. And it came to the point where there had to be a simple tribute to those who had died and who could not be at this sporting event because of COVID. And what we had was a solo of about 2 minutes from an artist called Mirai Moriyama, who is actually trained as a dancer because his mother ran a dance school in provincial Japan and became an actor, and he's quite a famous film and theatre actor. He's probably in his early 30s. I met him briefly in London 2 or 3 years ago when he was on his way to join a dance company in Israel. So when it came to the point of how to express that grief, what was it? One man watched by 68,000 empty seats and millions around the world. And it was dance.
So I guess you can't see the laughter. It was this quiet laughter.
I didn't hear that, I'm sorry.
There was this laughter in the room. I think it didn't come across to you.
I'm sorry, you have to come closer, I can't hear.
Oh, it's okay, it's okay. I just said that there were some laughing now in reaction to what you just told me, but I think this laughter didn't come across to you.
Ah, so why is it funny?
No, rather, I understood it as there's still, no, I don't want to add my interpretation now. No. It was a good story to hear that about the dance being in the center of the opening of the Olympics.
I just think it's interesting that, you know, one solo dancer can express that which can't be expressed in words. And that's why we all do it, because in the end, dance tells truths that words often disguise. And that's what drives people and will drive you sitting on the floor now to make work and to be vessels of creativity for others in the next 3 years as you emerge into this more difficult world. What will happen as far as Aerowaves is concerned is that we will devise, as we are doing now, methods to promote the work across Europe that we select that make as small an impact on the climate as possible. So we are trying now to find ways in which we can maintain the international presence of young artists, but at the same time limit the amount of aviation which is required to provide them with those opportunities. And this seems to be an absolutely primary necessity. And the second thing we're doing is thinking about issues of equity and to what extent we are properly representing the diversity of the dance scenes that we see around Europe. It may be that we are not doing that adequately, and we have to consider ways in which we will offer opportunities to those who might have been overlooked.
Great. I think this is a really nice moment to actually open up to the room, right, John?
Yep.
Where should I speak?
In this direction.
Okay.
Yeah,
thank you very much. Thank you for such an interesting, inspiring talk. My name is Asa. I'm currently studying headset Berlin, originally from Moscow, Russia. And I have a question to John about Aerowaves. And I was reading the application recently, and it's quite I found it quite narrow, that you can only apply with the work which was made, if I'm correct, the last year, but also not with the student work. So in this year, you should have a possibility to produce and show something, which is, I was curious why these criteria, why student graduation works are not, cannot be submitted. And also I was curious if you were thinking to open it, the platform not only for Europe, but outside as well, outside of Europe. So there's two questions.
Thank you. Two very good questions. The first one I can answer very directly, I think, which is that we decided to limit application this year to the works made in this year and the previous year, so that they were works made during times of COVID, because we thought it would not be fair to compare works made in times of COVID with those that have been made in times before COVID, because the world is really so different in making works. And those who made works before the times of COVID have had opportunities to apply to Aerowaves. So up until this year, people could apply with a work made at any time. Because of COVID, we decided to limit it to the period in which it's been very difficult to make work. So we're comparing the same things, if you like, works made under the same circumstances. It's also the case, as I explained earlier, that we have this backlog already of 40 works. So we need to see new ones. We don't need to see ones which have already been offered to us. So that's the first thing. The second thing about, well, I have a question for you, because I think you said you're from Moscow originally?
Yes.
Yeah. So first of all, Moscow is in Europe, of course. And as I said earlier, Aerowaves has always been geographically present in Europe. So that is the Ural Mountains. And we have presented works from Yekaterinburg, and it does go right across the Gorbayan Island. So there's no question that Moscow is in Europe, and you can apply from Moscow. And I would encourage you and anyone else to do so. We have a representative of Aerowaves in Moscow, who perhaps surprisingly is Elena Tupisova, who is the director of the Moscow Ballet. This may not seem the appropriate kind of organization to represent young choreographers, but that's because I met Elena when she was about 22, 23, 24 years old, and I felt she was very promising and talented, and invited her to become our representative for Russia. And what happens in Aerowaves is that, as I said, it's personal. It's not an institution. It's because of the individual. And the idea is that you stay as long as you want to. So we've all become a lot older, and there could be some changes in the next round. But at the moment, and it's likely that we might find some younger people to represent scenes where they are more closely associated with the younger work which is being presented. So the question I have for you is, given what we've been saying about the possibility of moving cities once you've completed your training, would you want to stay where you have trained, move back to Moscow, or move to Berlin or somewhere else in Europe?
I mean, I'm currently studying in Berlin, in Hesse, and my vision of future is to work for the both cities, Berlin and Moscow, because I cannot sustain my life with that in Moscow, but I really want to do works there because I find it important to do there. So I see my future as divided into cities.
And do you think that's realistic from a financial point of view?
I know that it's not realistic to do dance full time, like to work as a dancer and choreographer in Moscow, but I really, yeah, so it's not a choice for now, but I really want to, yeah, to develop the scene there in Russia. So yeah, I will find ways. I mean, also there is a question of flights and stuff, but I mean, trains are also existing. So we'll see.
So I think you said you're HZT?
Yes.
Yeah. So where did you train before then?
What?
Did you do a dance training in Russia before you went to Berlin?
No, it was visual arts. We
Right.
don't have. We only have one MA program in St. Petersburg, but we don't have any like contemporary dance training in Russia.
Okay. Right.
Okay. I mean, contemporary performance. Yeah.
Are the answers to your questions enough? Do you have further?
I would also ask the one about why don't you take a student graduation works, graduation pieces as an example of artistic practice for Aerowaves. Why
we don't take graduation pieces?
Yes.
Yes. That's been a matter of very strong debate over the years. Actually, our final, well, the reason why we don't is because those works have been made for an educational purpose. And they've been made in an educational context where you have been guided or perhaps directed in a certain way. So we're interested in work which is made in the professional context, where the artist is entirely free to address the audience they wish to find and not constrained by an educational environment, or indeed supported by an educational environment, because that's possibly unfair. On the other hand, because there are often works which cross boundaries here, we have said that we will accept works which have been made in full-time education if it can be demonstrated that they have entered the professional arena. So if, for instance, you make a work on graduating from HZT, which you can demonstrate has been selected for presentation by 2 or 3 structures, which are festivals or venues, then we would consider it, and you'd have to make a special case for that. So it might be, for instance, that someone makes a special case and actually find out that the 3 performances they're given are all where they've actually been to buy into a theatre. So all they've done really is to buy a theatre. That doesn't work. There has to have been a professional curatorial choice to present that work in a professional context, and then it is eligible.
Sorry, just one more thing. I would. I just use this opportunity partly for the for the Aerowaves presenter in Russia. I would really advise you maybe to take Anna Kazonina, who was writing also for Springback Magazine, recent article about Russian dance. and who just published a book about Russian dance, maybe she would be a great choice.
Thank you. She's in this, and indeed, there is on the website of Springback Magazine, you can find a lengthy article, actually the longest article we've ever published in Springback Magazine, which is a kind of abstract of her book. And it is indeed very good. And we're working with her actually in a Springback event in Umeå in Sweden in September, where she's going to be working with those who have been brought together, about 9 artists, to work on projects over the course of 3 months and then present a weekend of discussion and performances. And one of those people is Olga
Tsvetkova.
Sorry?
Maybe you mean Olga Tsvetkova?
I do, yes. Who also I think would be a good candidate, don't you?
Yes, I agree completely.
Thank you. That's very helpful, actually. Really seriously helpful. It's been worth coming here just for that. But I should say that Anna is brilliant. She's obviously also a very good candidate. And one thing which makes me very happy is when those young people who come to us as writers for Springback take on more and more roles within the organization, because it is people like Anna and Beatrix who are going to reinvigorate Aerowaves and keep what we do fresh as me and my regeneration retire.
Can I ask a question to the room, or are there questions that anyone else wants to ask a question now?
Please go. Yeah.
I would love to know where you are planning, or if you already have plans where you're planning to go after your degree. If anyone has already decided or maybe would like to share.
Does anyone want to go back to where they came from?
So there's laughter and like, no. I can't have opportunities. Like I will go whenever I have working opportunities, and then maybe one day go back from when I came.
Sorry, can you repeat that? I didn't quite manage to.
I was depending on the opportunities, actually. So to go for the next steps, and then maybe one day come back to where she's coming from.
Yeah. But opportunities across Europe or even further afield?
I think I will stay in Europe. Across Europe, yes.
And you'll travel by train when you go to auditions, won't you? You won't fly.
I usually take flight, but I will try to be more environmental.
Get an electric car. Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, I didn't answer the question earlier about why just Europe. We do have reciprocal relationships with South Korea, Japan, and Taiwan. And in our next round, we will extend those to Armenia, Georgia, and Tunisia. And so the idea here is that with our partners in those countries, they select a work from our 20, and we select something through a structure in their country, so that there is an international dimension to what we do as well. But you can't apply if you're outside Europe. Those are special arrangements. We have offered, for instance, to Jenna Jalonen, who is Hungarian but works in Budapest and Brussels, the opportunity to go to the Yokohama Dance Collection next year, and also do a 2-week residency in a town called Kinosaki, which is on the west coast of Japan, and it's a spa town between mountains and sea. I've been there, and it's kind of dream to be resident in such a place. And in exchange, there's a Japanese choreographer who's going to be performing in Elefsina and will do a residency in Athens, which is something of a dream, actually, for someone from Tokyo. So these broader relationships do exist, and we're trying to make them stronger and firmer, so that it's not just a helicopter visit in and out with a piece and you've gone, but rather an opportunity to meet people in the dance scene on the other side of the world and make lasting relationships, which will involve further exchange. We're also working with a choreographer called Hiroaki Umeda from Japan on a project called Movers Platform, where he live auditions for dancers from, in this case, Taiwan, Japan, and Greece. And then having selected them, and these are dancers, not choreographers, he then works with them over the period of about 3 months through Zoom in their studios, wherever they are, and brings out from them material that they may have made in the context of another choreographer's work, but which has not been required by that choreographer, or begins to find out what their individual voice is, so that they do something like a 5 minute or 10 minute solo. And then magically what he does is to bring them together for 5 days and weave these solos together into duets and trios and make a piece in that short space of time. This is another example of how we're trying to tackle international relationships with limiting aviation as far as we possibly can. So the principal creative work is actually done through Zoom, but it can only be done by the live introduction of the choreographer to the artist in an actual studio. So nobody wants to go back to where they came from, but does anyone know now where they do want to go and why? Is it just a matter of when the opportunity arrives, or does anyone think, I really want to go to Brussels because my favorite choreographers are working there and it's easy to go to their auditions? Man with his hand up on the left for me.
I do not know where I want to go, but with this I will bring my question, which is, how can I observe the different scenes in different cities around Europe without living there for an extended period of time?
That's a very good, yeah.
You know what's going on in different places.
That's a very good question, and I have a very practical answer as well. For €10, you can for 1 month be a member of Springback Magazine. And once you are a member, you have the privilege of being able to watch 60 videos from the last 3 years of Aerowaves applications, full length, and also a further 80, I think, which are 5-minute extracts of the ones who didn't make it. Now, if you're prepared to do hours of research through video, you can gradually identify who's working where and what you like by seeing what they do. I mean, I'm not suggesting you sit down and watch 60 full-length dance pieces, although that is possible. It may be that you look at the first 5 minutes and you think, oh, sorry, this is really not what I want to do. All they're doing is standing around, it's performance work, I want to dance. And then there may be another one where you find they're doing a lot of dancing. And you may find that, for instance, in Barcelona, they do a lot of dancing, whereas in Ghent, they may have given up on it altogether.
Thank you very much. That is helpful.
It's worth €10, it really is. You can also read the writing of Beatrix Joyce. And mine, actually.
No, that's also behind the paywall now. No.
What, your writing?
Yeah, well, that's what we were finding out in the Springback Magazine articles.
Yes, after 1 year, everything in Springback Magazine goes behind the paywall, and you do have to spend €10 on it. So anybody else who's got any clear idea about where they want to go, or a question related to that? Yes, hello. This is really good, it works. Who are you? What's your name? Come closer, I can't see you well enough.
My name is Emily, I'm from Israel.
Hello.
I think I would like to stay in the place where I studied. I feel like the school and the education can be very good idea of how the scene in Switzerland works, and made very strong connections in the local city, theaters. Therefore, I think I would like to.
Where is the city you studied?
In Lausanne, Switzerland.
Lausanne. Are you at the school there?
Yeah.
Ah. Right. That's a very good school. And do you want to work with people who you've studied with?
Yeah, possibly.
Yes. With Mr. Gapens, for instance.
No?
Somebody I know who's at the school. So anybody else want to stay where they are? I must say that I mean, Lausanne is not a city which is particularly known for dance. So I think it's really encouraging if people do want to stay where they have studied, because it means that then there is a local scene. And when there are local artists making what is probably quite radical work, then other artists will come and there'll be performances by other artists that you want to see. And that's, over the 25 years, what I've observed as happening throughout Europe. It's really important to think locally. How are we doing? Anybody got any other questions? This is your chance to say what a terribly time you've had during COVID as a dance student, if you wish to. We do recognize it's been very hard for the last year and a half to either not study at all because you're not allowed to go into studios, or indeed go into studios and find yourself so physically displaced that it's difficult to do anything which is other than solo work, or to perform in masks. This has been probably a unique experience in dance training. Does anyone in the room feel that they really should do another year of training because of the difficulties which you've experienced during the last year and a half? Or do you just want to get on with it? Yes, hello.
Yes. Laura? Yes, it feels a little bit like that. It's like you would need another year to like.
Do you have the opportunity to stay longer if you wish?
Just watch it. She doesn't look like it. I don't think so. But I guess there are other sources of like technique training.
Yeah.
You catch that up. So.
Maybe that's I haven't thought of this before, but possibly that's a good reason to go to a dance capital city, because there's a wider choice of further training available. Yeah. Somebody else put their hand up when I said, yes, hello.
I mean, I was actually thinking a lot to stay 1 more year, because we have like possibilities to stay 1 more year. But now after this event, I feel like I want to work already. Really, I think I changed my mind.
I really think you have to get on with it. You know, where is it that you've been studying?
Hetzete is the same person.
Okay, no, I think even if I might have been a little bit pessimistic with saying that, you know, there's a whole army of people waiting for opportunities, I'm convinced that the fluidity of the world as we escape the pandemic is going to allow opportunities which none of us can foresee, and which you have the energy and the enthusiasm and the drive to take right now, whereas others who have been around for a few years are really going to have to do things differently. I mean, from all of the artists that I listen to in Zoom conferences, there are so many who say, well, actually, I'm not sure if I want to tour anymore. You know, I've got a home life. Wouldn't it be easier if I was resident in my local dance facility for 3 months rather than traveling to this place for 1 week and then that place for 1 week and then another place for 1 week, so that my creation process is so fractured. So I can understand that if you're in your 30s and you've already done all that. But if you haven't done it, then those opportunities are going to be up for grabs. And I'm sure that you're going to take them.
Yeah, you cannot see me, but I'm also here. About the Corona COVID situation, I must say, for me and for a lot of French students of mine, that we have experienced that it wasn't, I mean, it was, let's say, a horrible time, but that the rebound from that horrible time to now has given me and them a completely different change in how to approach this dance and what it actually means for us. So,
is it more precious?
Yes. Yes, I would say yes. Yes. It gave it all more valuable things. Yes.
I think, I mean, maybe my example of the Olympics wasn't a good one, but I do, you know, I'm not the only one who absolutely believes in dance. If I think back to the 2012 Olympics in the UK, 2012, was it? I'm not sure. But you were there then, probably, Beatrix.
I wasn't there, but there were friends of mine who were in the ceremony, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, because they were dancing a piece by Akram Khan.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the centerpieces of the opening was a very good piece by Akram Khan for about 20 dancers. And it's very interesting that when you know, in the end, when you have to celebrate something worldwide, which is going to communicate beyond borders, then people choose dance. It works. I mean, it's so important to be a part of the whole ecology, which gives the possibility of these grander events. So often people ask me about, you know, why dance is such a minority art form and why audience development hasn't produced larger audiences, and isn't that a failure in some way if a young artist through Aerowaves crosses Europe to play for 50 people in a room and go away again? I really don't think so, because I think there is a ripple effect. I think people remember dance performances with a force which they do not, for instance, remember a television program. There is something about the fundamental communication of the body in a room with other bodies who respond with kinesthetic empathy that transcends many other forms of communication. And that's what you've been taught, really. I mean, you are precious vehicles for this. So the last thing I would want to do is to suggest that there won't be opportunities to learn to use what you've learned. I'm sure there will be, and you will make them, and they will be very different from the ones which I or even Beatrix can imagine. That's exciting.
So thanks a lot for the two of you for your time and for your really, really interesting insights. Thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you for having us.